We have a fantastic panel that we're going to hear from before we open the floor to discussions. There are 3 members of the panel. We have Gillian Lonergan, who is a former co-op librarian and archivist. We have Hazel Remeika from the Community and Shared Value team of the Co-op group. And we have McCallum, who is co-director of the Awel Co-op and Egni Co-op. And I know Dan very well from my own constituency. So Hazel, can I ask you to make your contribution first?
Well, I'm just so fantastic. Thank you, Jonathan. So good morning, everyone. So my name's Hazel Remeika. I'm the Academy's business partner at the Co-op Group. So my role is very much about how, as a business, we support our Co-op Academies Trust. So what I plan to do today is to talk through the Co-op Academies Trust and the role of the Co-op within that. So making reference to the social value that we're kind of supporting within that. So for those of you who are not familiar with the Co-op Academies Trust, it was formed back in 2010 when we started to support schools in Manchester and Stoke. And then very quickly we took on some more schools in Leeds. And at that time it was 5 schools and the Co-op Group looking at how it could support those schools to improve the educational outcomes in those areas. So then in 2013, we actually created the Co-op Academies Trust, and that enabled us to then have a separate legal entity that could then really focus on the school improvement of those schools, because that's what was needed, and we can bring in educational expertise. So over the next few years, the Co-op Academies Trust grew. And then in 2018, there was an active decision made by the Co-op Group to kind of supercharge the growth of the trust. And then we started to grow very quickly. And what that now looks like is that we still have ambitions to grow as a trust up to around 40 academies. And we remain looking at the north of England because that's where the educational outcomes are lowest. And so therefore we can have the greatest impact. But we recognise that there is a need to still have that connection in terms of the Co-op Support Centre in Manchester, and also looking at kind of what that support could mean in terms of the links to the business. So how we actually support the Co-op Academies Trust has evolved over the years, and obviously it looks very different now to what it did back in 2010. But essentially what we're looking to do as a business is to really look at how as a business we support education. So that can be very practically through things like the provision of governors. We know that strong governance is really important in terms of ensuring that academies can continue to drive that improvement. And to have that oversight through the governing body enables that to happen. But then we've also practically helped out through things like development of the infrastructure of the Co-op Academies Trust, so that as it's moved away from local authority control, you have those infrastructures in place that can support the academies in the ways that they need. So at the beginning, it was very much around HR and finance. And that has now grown so that actually what we have is a really extensive complement of subject directors that are able to go in and work with our academies and actually continue to look at how we can support our academies to grow in particular areas and have that expertise on hand. So it does look very different in terms of how the Co-op Academies Trust is now organised, and all of that has been enabled through the growth of the trust over the last 12 years. So in terms of then how as a business we continue to support our academies, obviously there is a significant amount of support that we provide centrally, and that's through having that continuous link to our support centre. So that means that as we've grown and you end up in a situation where certain things may not be working as well as they could, like IT and networks and infrastructure, we've been able to second colleagues from the Co-op Group into the Co-op Academies Trust to be able to start to enable that to happen and bring them that expertise immediately, which is not always available when you work within the education sector. And then we're looking at how as an organisation we can actually look at the kind of social value, the social action, and how do we bring the cooperative values and principles that our academies are founded on to life. And that's the work that I'm very much involved with. So back in 2019-20, we were very much looking at the Co-op Group's vision and purpose. And so our vision and purpose is about cooperating for a fairer world. And so we want to look at how we bring our academies into that and actually enable them to be a part of it, but also it's a way that we deliver that in terms of the community role that we play within our academies. So all of the work that we now do with our academies is aligned very clearly to our community vision and purpose, and looking at what our key pillars are. So those are around youth opportunities, wellbeing and food. So we really want to look at how we can make sure that there are opportunities that the Co-op Group provides to our students within our academies that they wouldn't get if we weren't their sponsor. So that looks like having a comprehensive Co-op careers offer. So we're really clear about the support that we're providing to our academies for both primary and secondary careers. We've had virtual work experience, which was really key during COVID, when physical work experience was no longer available. And this is a piece of work that will evolve, because actually what we're doing is we're listening to our academies and then responding to the needs of the students. And then we've also had the opportunity to look at specific pieces of work where we know that as the trust has grown and we've had different academies join, and one of them is a college that is for post-16, we can then start to really develop that link between the Co-op Academies Trust and actually having young people have the opportunity to come into the Co-op as a business and actually work for us. So we've got a programme that offers, previously it was paid work placements, and there will be unpaid work placements going forwards, which is aligned to the BTEC business studies. So you actually provide an opportunity for young people to put their business learning into practice in a national business with a large scale that they can then understand what that then looks like. But in addition to that, there's other activity that we're delivering that is about developing that cooperative leadership skill and that vision around what does a co-op leader look like through our Co-op Young Leaders programme, which started in Co-op Academy Stoke and has been so successful, is now rolling out across a number of our academies, and is a real example of how you can take best practice from one academy and actually share it across the trust. We continue to look at wellbeing. It was something that we focused on as part of our partnership with Mind, but we know that this is an area that is going to be so key for young people both now and in the future, and we will continue to look at how we support our academies. So to date, that's been through the development of a whole trust approach to mental health and wellbeing. And at the time, that was to say that it's wellbeing and mental health is as important as physical health. So how can we support our academies to raise that profile and enable them to have that infrastructure, to have that embedded within the academy? And as a food business, it makes sense that we will look at how we can support our academies through access to food. So we've got our partnerships with organisations like Community Fridges and Your Local Pantry. So where possible, we're looking at how we can actually enable our academies to play that role in their community and to make those services available. And where possible, if there are commercial campaigns that we're engaged with, that is something that our academies are actively encouraged and supported to take part in. As a business, we're committed to equality, diversity and inclusion. So we had our commitment to anti-racism, and as a part of that, we wanted to develop an anti-racist curriculum across the trust. So we've been working with Leeds Beckett and their CRED department. So they're the experts in terms of developing an anti-racist curriculum, but then looking at how that could be developed within the trust and then support our academies on that journey as well. And obviously we're more than aware, and we're all kind of seeing the impact of climate change and the importance of sustainability. And our young people in our academies are really passionate about this. So we are practically looking at how we can support them in terms of their social action at grassroots level, but also practically as an academy, how they can work towards things like eco schools, so that they can empower young people to have a voice, be heard, and make that difference that they want to see within their communities. So that's a very quick overview of the Co-op Academies Trust, and obviously I'll be available to take questions afterwards. Thank you.
Hazel, thank you for that. That's brilliant. Really interesting stuff that I really would like to pick up on some of those points with you, either in this discussion or separately as well. I think there's some good things that we can learn from there. Thank you very much. Jonathan, how is it looking in terms of getting Gillian's video to play?
Yep, we can always give it a second go. So I'll just quickly do that, if that's okay.
Hello, and thank you for the opportunity of talking about Robert Owen and education. He's a person who has fascinated me for a very long time. And it strikes me that education is something that runs through everything that Robert Owen ever did. And to a great extent, everything that the cooperative movement has ever done as well. So it's a fascinating subject to look at. To start off with Owen's experience of formal education, it was actually quite short. He went to school in Newtown, where he lived with his family, of course. Between the ages of 4 and 5, he started school, and he was incredibly keen. He always wanted to be the first to arrive at school and the last to leave at the end of the day, and wanted to learn as much as he possibly could. As a result of which, the teacher had to go to his parents when Robert Owen turned 7 to say that he had now taught Robert everything that he knew. And so could Robert now be employed as a teacher? And if you think of employing somebody at the age of 7 to teach younger children, it's no wonder he was fascinated by education throughout his life. Now, he didn't think that that was enough education for him. He really wanted to carry on. So he made friends with a lot of people in the town who had collections of books. And he got permission from those people to borrow books, take them away, read them, and take them back. So by the time he left home at the age of 11 to go off and be apprenticed, he had actually pretty much read every book that there was in Newtown. Must have been a fascinating range of experiences that he had there. When he became an apprentice, of course, he was learning all the time. That's what apprentices do mostly. But he also carried on his own education, reading, finding out information, joining groups, all sorts of things. By the time he was in his 20s, he was in Manchester, and he joined the Manchester Literary and Philosophical Society. Now, this was before the turn of 1800. So if you think, it's quite a long time ago that he was there. But he was learning from other people as they were giving talks and things, and he started to give his own talks. It's really where he gained experience of public speaking that he carried on doing throughout his life. He then went up to New Lanark, where he took over the management of the mills up there. And one of the things that he brought in was educational opportunities for everyone. And he famously believed that education should start as soon as you could walk away from your mother's arms and should carry on throughout your life. So he had a school there for the workforce children, right from very young. And he said also, which as a librarian I shouldn't really like, but I do, that young children should not be bothered too much by books. He felt that an active education was really important. So he had a really warm, comfortable education room, and he put in place a school uniform, which was a light cotton shift, because he felt that the stiff clothing that most children wore at the time wasn't conducive to learning. So he wanted them to be free and able to move as much as they needed to. Every day started with dancing, the old idea of get up, get moving, get your brain working as well. He really, really believed in. The children all went out on nature walks. They went out to visit different places, to find out things. And a really active education was what he was involved in. Later on, he was involved with the New Harmony Society. And there they had a school. This was in America in the 1830s. They had all sorts of things. The National Cooperative Archive has a copy of the school timetable, which includes all the usual sort of reading, writing and arithmetic. But they were also learning languages. They were learning drawing, all sorts of subjects that they were involved in, alongside vocational education. So the children were getting to go out to the farm, spend time with the animals, spend time with the wheelwright, spend time doing all sorts of different education, experiencing things in different ways. And again, that active education that he was so keen on. He also felt that adults should be learning. At New Lanark, he had the Institute for the Formation of Character, which provided for the adults all sorts of courses, lectures, and a lot of social activities, because he always felt that learning would happen better if there was a bit of fun alongside it. And if you look at the cooperative movement, he was known as the father of cooperation, and cooperators really took up his ideas on education. They provided schools for the children, and education experiences for the adults. So as soon as they had any space, they would set up discussion groups, they would set up libraries, and all sorts of courses, lectures were done. They were bringing in university lecturers to speak to ordinary working class people. And cooperative societies were famous for their teas. They would have afternoon tea, lots of social activities, all with a little bit of education thrown in. And that idea that education is for everybody, and it goes down really well if you're having fun at the same time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, Gillian. I'm really looking forward to picking up some of that in the discussion that follows. I'm just struck that a couple of the points you were making there resonates with some of the things we're trying to do in the curriculum in Wales, a focus on learning outdoors, and also that, you know, that idea of lifelong learning, that idea that it's never too late to learn in life is also so important, isn't it, from, as you were saying in your contribution. So thank you very much for that. And finally, for the panelists, before we open the floor for discussion, we have Dan McCallum. Dan.
Thank you, Jeremy. Just can everyone hear me okay?
Absolutely, yes, Dan, thanks.
Yeah, good. Okay, great. Yeah, so Dan McCallum, I work for a charity, and we've set up two cooperatives, a community wind farm and Egni Co-op, which has got a lot of rooftop solar on schools, businesses and community buildings throughout South Wales. Yeah, and I was just really interested to listen to the sort of sessions this morning, just think about kind of some of the things that we're doing, some of the limitations on what we're doing and how that relates to cooperatives. But I really like what Gillian was saying about, you know, cooperation needing to be fun. So that's something that we really try and do. We've got a full-time education officer who works in schools, and one of the things she does is sort of we work with a rapper from North Wales who does kind of music, you know, with the children around stuff around energy, climate change, but in a fun way, and the children then make their own raps. And there is a brilliant one, if you look on YouTube, on Penarail Comp, done a really good rap. So yeah, it's got to be fun, and obviously things around climate change can be quite scary, and we just need to find positive ways to engage people in that. I think so. One of the things that we do, I'll just sort of share this really, is we donate shares to in the cooperatives to schools and to community groups around our projects. You know, because you know we're based in a village, you know, sort of Gwaenca Gyrwan, Cymllynfell, and they're not wealthy, and those, you know, the people living there. Okay, there's a few people that can afford to invest maybe £50 in a wind farm or solar panels, but not generally. And to be honest, if people are having to really think carefully about whether they do invest or not, they probably shouldn't be. So I think we kind of really tried to think about how we could try and provide engagement locally and financial money back into the local area. So one of the things that we came up with as part of the sort of business model of the cooperative was to donate shares. So there's about £100,000 of shares in our wind farm, which are owned by groups like Merched y Wawr, you know, the rugby club, football club, the arts centre, community centres, just a whole range, because obviously, and everyone locally then benefits from that, and they are full co-op members of our wind farm, but they haven't had to buy the shares. So typically they own sort of £2,000 or £3,000 of shares each, and then that gives them an annual return, depending on whether the wind farm generates, you know, so they are directly kind of involved in the business. And we do that as well with schools. We've got about 40 schools with solar panels, and we also donate £500 of shares to them. And again, the idea being that they, you know, begin to learn about how co-ops can get involved in climate change. They can attend the AGM, you know, it's one member, one vote, they can vote. So, and there's a little bit of money that comes back in each year as well, if the whole co-op performs, you know, the solar generation is good in that year. and obviously at the moment energy prices are really high, so there is a likelihood is that they will get an annual return. But so there's that sort of, we just felt there was a need to kind of like get engagement in the cooperative beyond the people that just that fund the capital cost of the project. I mean, we've got 1,500 standard members, and they put in their money. It's capped. The interest rate is capped, so it's capped at 4% per year that they can get returned. But that interest rate has to be set at a level to attract the investment in place. So we've raised about £8 million from the 2 share offers that we've done. So yeah, so it's a way of engaging people. And then I suppose the most important thing is that the surplus from these projects goes back into the local area. So there's some really interesting, obviously renewable energy is booming now, absolutely booming. I was at the Future Energy Wales conference a couple of days ago, and the number of stalls and companies there was enormous. The one really good thing Welsh Government has done is encouraging shared ownership of these wind farms. So rather than money going, quite frankly, mainly abroad to sort of state-owned energy companies, it's the job of everyone really to try and retain as much of that value as possible in Wales. And that's not just through a community benefit package, it's through as much ownership as we can of these projects. And obviously the Welsh Government development entity is great, and that'll be really interesting to sort of work with that to look at ways of partnering with it, I guess, because Welsh Government isn't going to be able to fund all of the costs needed for these these wind farms. So there's a natural cooperation there between not-for-profit organisations that can raise money in conjunction with government. But there are a couple of there are some other wind schemes that are taking place now where there is shared ownership. So one example is above Port Talbot, which is a huge project, 100 megawatts, and on that one we've linked up with Port Talbot CVS, with the main voluntary sector body in the borough, and also Bridgend CVS, who so it's a joint project between us to secure up to about 20% of that wind farm, and to kind of retain the value of it within Port Talbot and Bridgend. So and to look at ways of broadening cooperation within it with the schools nearby, with local community groups. So it's a very interesting time, and a time of great opportunity. And although in the UK we can't supply houses directly, which is a real shame, unlike in Europe, I'm really jealous of of co-ops in Belgium, Germany, where they're able to supply directly. But anyway, that's the way that Ofgem and the government have set it up, and so at the moment we've got to work within that. But I think that's really, really something we need to move towards in the future, because I mean, fundamentally, it's just about values. The big energy companies are not actually that interested in helping their customers reduce their energy use, because it doesn't fit in with the business model, obviously. Whereas co-ops can, because of their value base. And I've seen that in Belgium with co-ops like EcoPower, where they literally do work with their customers to reduce their energy demand, as well as supplying them from their wind farms and other sort of renewable energy assets. And it's asset-based, so they don't go bust, unlike some of the sort of kind of trading type energy companies that sprang up in the UK. But I think that's probably enough for me to have said, and I look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Dan, thank you very much for that. There's lots there to unpack and to come back to in the discussion.